I'm wet. I'm wet. I'm hysterical and I'm wet. Welcome, huge movie fanatic Nate, stopping on by. This time I'm coming your way for, you guessed it, another one of my famed movie/Blu-ray reviews. Today I will be reviewing the movie and also the Blu-ray of one of the I don't know how many Blu-rays that were released of this movie, but this is indeed one of them. Coming your way to review the movie and this Blu-ray of The Producers. This is a movie I've known about for quite a long time, ever since I was a kid. I very first saw Young Frankenstein when I was a kid. One Halloween I actually dressed up as Igor. I tried to, dress up as good as I could as Igor. I had like a cape and I put a lump or a hump in my back with a ball, inflatable ball or a pillow or something. So I tried to be, Igor from Young Frankenstein one Halloween as a kid. So from a young age, I was introduced to Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder, and I'm not the biggest Mel Brooks fan. I mean, his humor, it's kind of, for the most part, Mel Brooks humor isn't necessarily my forte, but some of it is. It's me and Mel Brooks don't necessarily mesh that well, but I do like, I'm a bigger fan of Gene Wilder than I am of Mel Brooks. Of course, they kind of co-wrote Young Frankenstein, so I probably like a lot more of the humor in Young Frankenstein because a lot of it might be, Gene Wilder humor. I mean, if you see my review that I did last year of The Haunted Honeymoon, which was a Gene Wilder movie that he directed and either partly or completely wrote, there's a lot of the shtick that was, formerly in, that it was also found in Young Frankenstein and that. So, a lot of the humor in Young Frankenstein that I like might be more Gene Wilder humor than Mel Brooks humor. But this is actually Mel Brooks. I didn't know that much about this movie. I didn't know anything about it. But this is actually Mel Brooks' first movie. And it's the first, starring role of Gene Wilder was in a movie. He was I think the only movie he showed up in before The Producers was a bit part in Bonnie, the original Bonnie and Clyde, of which of course he's great in that. And I think he was, I can't remember if he got hysterical in that, and then little bit scenes in that as well. But if you know anything about early Gene Wilder, possibly later Gene Wilder, but I haven't seen a whole hell of a lot of his stuff. But if you know anything for sure about early Gene Wilder, you know that he's famous for being able to successfully and wonderfully get hysterical as he does in this movie, and also Young Frankenstein and stuff. So this is, I think it's 1968, and this is The Producers. And I mentioned in a video that I think me and Matt did from, was it last year? It might have been last year when we were trying to do videos on baseball fields and kept getting kicked off of baseball fields. And anyway, I think I talked about, we were doing like a Q&A or something, and it came up where like the only decade of the 20th century that I'm not keen on in regards to movies, with the exception of, films. Obviously there's some films like 2001: A Space Odyssey and certain other films that can't come to mind right now, James Bond films and stuff. Like, I'm not a big, huge fan of the 60s in regards to movies and, in cinema and stuff. And this movie is kind of an example of why not. And I recently saw for free on Prime this movie that Alec Baldwin holds in really high regard, and of course he probably saw it when he was a youngster, and maybe that's why he likes it. But I just saw it, for the first time. It's a mad world. And if you want to know why movies of the 60s were, more or less just completely fucked, I mean, check out It's a Mad World. I mean, that movie is just this kind of grandiose epic, which is like, better part of almost 3 hours of basically nonsense, and it's just like 60s was a really weird transition decade where it was kind of, I think things in the first 50 years or so, of the 20th century in regards to just culture and stuff was kind of similar. And then all of a sudden the 60s was this big shift decade where we're going to change, we're going to do this dramatic shift from the first half of the 20th century into the last half of the 20th century with this major just shift like that. And it's just a goofy ass shift. Not to say, as I said, that that there's no movies of warrant or any kind of quality that came out of the 60s, but I think for the most part, holy Hannah, It's a Mad, 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 Mad World is a perfect example of just, movies, just psychoticness, just, nonsensicalness from, comedy movie from the 1960s. But this was another one. The 60s seemed like just a decade in movies of just like hysterical, zany kind of comedy, which doesn't really necessarily float my boat. Jerry Lewis or whatever, and just like, just like, as I said, not to say that, there's nothing of any kind of merit that came out of the 60s. I mean, Night of the Living Dead, 2001: Space Odyssey, there's some stuff that comes to mind. But The Producers is kind of an interesting story about this guy, and I don't think I've ever seen this one guy in a movie before. Zero Mostel, he's really good. I mean, he's the people, the actors, the performers in this movie are pretty good. Of course, this one guy who I know, of course, from who go on to be in Young Frankenstein. But the premise of this movie is basically the Zero Mostel, I don't know how to pronounce the last name, basically portrays this New York producer who's, I guess he's had a decent career, but I think his career has since waned, and he's on the, he's basically, when we enter into this situation with we meet this character, or these characters in this movie, it's like, the Zero Mostel character is at the end of his rope, and he's basically just, he's resorting to basically sleeping with, getting paid to sleep with older women to finance any productions, any Broadway productions. Now he basically just, takes rich, old, little old, I was gonna say orphans. Well, what are they called? If you've got a like a husband who dies, then you're a. Why do I want to keep saying orphan? You're a widowed. You're a widow. Yeah, these old, presumably widows, rich widows and stuff, and kind of gives them a thrill of their life. I guess he's prostituting himself out to all these, old, wrinkled widows to basically, keep a roof under his head, or to finance his, his Broadway productions that keep going to hell. Enter Gene Wilder, who I guess is, what is he there? I've seen this twice and, didn't take any notes, so this is all just from the fly, but watched it once myself, and then I showed Beth this, and yeah, I mean, Beth enjoyed, as did I, the secretary, the ditzy blonde, bombshell frickin' secretary. She that was like, I'm like, is there anything of The Producers you liked? And Beth's like, I liked the secretary. Well, that's understandable, but I, for the record, enjoyed more, took more enjoyment from The Producers than Beth did. But yeah, enter Gene Wilder, who I think is like his, has come to work as his accountant or whatever, and early on, and Gene Wilder looks at the books of the Zero Mostel character, and he's like, you know what, you could potentially make more money with a flop on Broadway than with a hit. So the whole premise of this movie, which I know they've gone on to remake with Matthew Broderick and whatever the hell the other guy's name is, Nathan Lane, I want to say, yeah. Was it the 90s they remade that into a Nathan Lane, Matthew Broderick movie? But is The Producers, did it become a play on Broadway as well, possibly, which would be really ironic. But it all started with this movie. But once Gene Wilder becomes the guy's accountant, he realizes they could make potentially more money with a flop on Broadway than with a hit. So the whole movie is about trying to find the absolute worst story, the worst premise to make a Broadway, play about, and the worst premise, the worst actors, the worst everything, and they end up, coming across this play written by this former Nazi, who's played by the guy who'll go on to play the constable or whatever the hell he is in Young Frankenstein, with the the wooden hand, or the whatever hand he's got, a guy who would go on to be in at least one other Mel Brooks films. Not having seen a whole lot of Mel Brooks films, I don't know who the hell's in the majority of Mel Brooks's films, but yeah, the premise of this movie is just putting together the worst possible play imaginable, and all the stuff that goes, and not only finding the worst story, but the worst actors, the worst songwriters, the worst everything, to basically get a lot of investors to put money into this movie. I can't remember all the logistics that the Gene Wilder character says to, you know, how it's like I don't know if you can you know, if it's legal to have put all this money into a movie and have it flop or whatever. But what's so funny about the movie is as it wears on, like all these, and then of course the Zero Mostel character has to go out and, you know, whore himself out to all these little old ladies, and some of the ladies are investors that are in for 50%, then there's another one who's 50%, then the next one is 100%. So I mean, they're just defrauding all these women, obviously, not expecting to having you know, to have to pay anything to these investors, because they don't plan to make anything, because, you know, they want this movie, this play, to basically close on opening day, you know, because it's going to be so trashed, and so people are going to walk out and it's going to be trashed in the reviews and all this and that. And I guess I won't spoil. I mean, you probably know. Oh my God, I'll mention it now just in case I forget. William Hickey, the puppet master, the original puppet master. This is the youngest I've ever seen. I think in the credits he's credited as Bill Hickey, but none other than this is definitely the youngest version of William Hickey I've ever saw. None other than William Hickey makes an appearance in The Producers from 1968. That's a young William Hickey. That it was really fun to see you know, William Hickey show up towards the end of the movie. But that's the premise of the movie. You know, I don't generally, because of my own personal, you know, I guess my personality or whatever, I don't generally, although I loved it in, you know, the Gene Wilder hysterics in Young Frankenstein, I don't generally go in for this kind of just hysterical, just, you know, kind of yelling, kind of whatever, hysterical comedy. But like, I guess when Gene Wilder's doing it, it's just a pass, because I really, really like Gene Wilder. Like I said, I saw Young Frankenstein when I was probably a single-digit kid, and I really, really have always just admired and just really, really liked Gene Wilder ever since. And that his voice, you know, and just Gene Wilder. I mean, I just always loved Gene Wilder. So even though I might, like, if someone else were in the part of Gene Wilder's part in this movie doing the hysterics and stuff, I might not necessarily go along with, but because it's like Gene Wilder and such a young Gene Wilder, it's kind of enjoyable. And I gotta say, you know, having seen, I don't think I thought too much of the movie the first time I saw it, but then when I, you know, watched it a second time and made Beth watch it, I was like, you know what, this is, you know, this is kind of charming in a kind of hysterical Mel Brooks kind of goofy ass, you know, questionable humor kind of way. Just all of the characters they end up coming up, you know, against, and like of course, did I mention the play that they ended? I don't think I was working towards it and never actually got to it. The play that they ended up, you know, deciding on was this play written by this former Nazi. And the play's called Springtime for Hitler, and there's also there's a musical number, which I think Mel Brooks wrote the musical number, like, you know, the Springtime for Hitler musical number, and this and that, and you know, there's a couple musical, there's at least one musical number in the play or whatever, and it's, you know, and I gotta tell you, when the camera, and, you know, during the play or the musical number, and they're doing Springtime for Hitler, the song or whatever, and the camera cuts up to a high angle shot from just looking down, and the people are marching in a kind of this, you know, this swastika shape, and you know, spinning and keeping the shape. It's like, oh my God. But yeah, so, you know, I gotta admit, when I saw it the first time, I wasn't so keen on it, and a lot of the characters, and especially the director guy, you know, I'm not so keen on seeing men in women attire and stuff, and, you know, a lot of the characters that they ended up coming up with and stuff were a little questionable. And one thing I will say, though, about that guy who they ended up, you know, the hippie kind of guy who they ended up having play Hitler, of course, you know, then later on when I would go on to see for free on Prime, luckily, it's a mad world. Of course, that guy, you know, who played Hitler in The Producers in Springtime for Hitler was also, I think It's a Mad World came out before The Producers, but that guy was also previously in, you know, that movie, so I guess he was a familiar face from the 60s. But that guy, you know, it's so funny how like some of these characters might have annoyed me the first time I saw it. Of course, it all depends on the mood you are in when you watch a movie. But then the second time I saw it, I'm like, I was more on board with, you know, some of the zaniness and some of these characters, and I was laughing at stuff the second time that I wasn't really laughing at the first time. I might have been in a bad mood when I saw it the first time. But yeah, that's the premise of the producers, and I guess I'll tell you what, yeah, I probably wouldn't have went this high on my first viewing, but there's something about it, and it's so funny is, you know, although it took me until I was, you know, nearly 50 years old to see the producers, like there's something about like images and clips and scenes from it that I've always just been aware of, like stills, and they've always been like so colorful, and I've always, you know, I've seen either stills and or clips from this movie for the longest time, but it took me this long to actually see the movie. I do kind of like even it's like a relatively low budget movie, I do, you know, like how the movie looks, and I guess it's that aggressive like top lighting. Like I don't generally go in for that. I like more naturalistic, like Stanley Kubrick kind of lighting that's supposed to just look like, you know, reality lighting versus like, you know, TV slash movie lighting with the top light and the, you know, whatever else kind of light. But there's something about I guess the heavy top light in this movie, and I don't know, I just think particularly on this Blu-ray release, like the colors are so colorful, and it's just, you know, back in the, you know, frickin' 60s when obviously before digital cinema was a thing, and just like the celluloid looks so you know, robust and celluloidy, if that's a word, and, you know, so did I give? I don't think I gave my star rating. I think I probably wouldn't have given this on my first viewing, but I think having seen it for a second time, I think I can, you know, I think it's got this, what I was trying to say earlier, and I got distracted, is what I was trying to say earlier is that I guess at the end of the day, this movie has, even though it's got a lot of hysterical, zany, kind of goofy ass scenes and stuff, it does kind of have this like late 60s somehow charm to it, and the way it looks, and I just love Gene Wilder, and you know, this is my first Zero Mostel, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Mostel movie, and I think he was great too. So like the two main guys and some of the supporting guys, you know, performers and characters, and obviously the hot blonde frickin' secretary. It's so funny because, yeah, she's like, "We go to a hotel now?" And it's like, no, you know, the two guys, we're going to a hotel. And she's like, "Oh, you go to a hotel, ha ha ha." And it's so funny, like, okay, you know, this woman's supposed to be some foreigner from Sweden or some shit, and she don't know English, so she knows, like, you know, the word hotel and, like, work, you know, and it's like, you know, Nadia, or whatever the hell your name is, you know, work. And then, you know, she goes to the turntable, puts on a record, and starts, she's got, like, a, you know, probably no bra on and a short dress or whatever, and just starts dancing and moving all around, and she's parts of her are bouncing all around. So in true Mel Brooks fashion, you know, his very first film, of course, has to flaunt the female form, of course, being a heterosexual male. I've got absolutely no problem with the hot blonde secretary in this movie. So did I say the star rating yet? I can't remember. I can go as high as amazingly, just because of its charm, I guess, and even though I'm not particularly crazy about movies from the 60s, I guess this movie gets a pass. I can go as high as 3 stars out of 4 stars for the producers. It's just kind of this zany frickin' movie, just full of all these goofy characters, and it's kind of a movie that really kind of just lifts you up. It does what a movie is supposed to do, or at least in my opinion what a movie is supposed to do, is just kind of make you necessarily, or make you forget about your real world problems, and just put you into for 90 minutes or so, just this fantasy world of whatever. And you know, the auditions for the different Hitlers and stuff was funny and stuff. So I guess that's my review for the movie. Now on to my review for the Kino Lorber release, and of course, you know, my eyes being nearly 50 years old, I can't look at how small the print is on the bottom of this. You know, I'm going to cut and try to read this. Give me 1 sec. My eyes are still good. All I needed to go over by some more light. This Blu-ray release came out in 2021. I don't know if it would be the most recent Blu-ray release that anyone put out of the producers or not. I don't know anything about that. Doesn't say anything about the scan that I'm seeing on the back, or at least in my initial Oh, okay. Yeah, Dick Shawn must be the guy from It's a Mad World. Kenneth Mars is the guy who'd go on to be the constable in Young Frankenstein. But like I say, I don't know if this is the most recent Blu-ray release of this film. I just got it because I got it at a on sale at a springtime Kino Lorber sale. But one thing I will say, and I know that the review on Blu-ray.com says this movie's somehow, I don't know how they know this scan or whatever, this home video Blu-ray version is sourced from all kinds of different, or at least it looks like it's sourced from all kinds of different, avenues or different sources and this and that, so that, the reviewer claims the color palette and this and that changed throughout the course of the movie. I mean, honestly, when you're just watching a movie, I didn't really notice that stuff. All I know is that, like, the colors are just so colorful for the most part. The grain, if you've been watching any of my reviews for any amount of time of Blu-ray reviews, you know that I'm a grain guy. I love my film grain. The film grain, is heavily, wonderfully represented and intact in this Blu-ray presentation. As I say, the image being, like, wonderfully, and I don't generally, like I say, I don't generally go in for movies looking like this, like just overly, like, overlit, over top light, but I mean, somehow it just, for some reason, it works for this movie. Maybe the over the top aspect of the movie demands over the top lighting and just, I guess over the top lighting or something. But the colors are on this Blu-ray presentation are absolutely just really great. And the contrast in the colors, I was just striking. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of movies from the 60s, like, I do think this is one of those, like I say, Night of the Living Dead, 2001: A Space Odyssey, a lot of the early James Bond films. They're movies that I like from the 60s. But just as in general, I'm not the decade for films, the 20th century that I'm least excited for or enthusiastic for would definitely be the 60s if I had to pick one. But yeah, the Blu-ray presentation on the video front of this particular title is absolutely stellar. One thing that I will say on the audio front is, obviously, being a low-budget film, 1968, I'm pretty sure this movie has, always existed in just monaural, mono sound, non-stereo to you layman's. But which is fine. I mean, I'm one of these individuals who, I can only assume there isn't a 5.1 version of this on this disc. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I'm one of these kind of purists who kind of thinks, like, if a movie existed in mono, it should kind of always exist in mono. Or if someone does 5.1 a movie that was originally mono, the original mono should definitely be an option to listen to. But one thing I will say about the sound is, holy Hannah, I don't know what the hell the reason for is, but I really had to turn the volume a lot higher up on this title than I do for most Blu-ray titles. Like, it had to go, like, for most titles the volume was like somewhere maybe around 30 or 40. I had to go up to like 50, 60, maybe 70 on this title to actually have it be the normal kind of volume. So for some reason the audio on this Blu-ray disc is really quiet. Not exactly sure why that would be the case, but absolutely stellar video presentation, and the audio for some reason is relatively quiet. But of course, having seen this movie only 2 times, I don't have anything to compare the audio to, other than the fact that the audio was just quiet. The audio, I didn't notice any other anomalies that stood out to report. As you can see here, special features. You've got audio commentary by filmmaker / historian That Guy, the making of The Producers, which I think is a featurette that was produced sometime maybe in the early 2000s or something. That I actually did watch, and I think it was like somewhere around an hour long. And of course, back when if that featurette was, or if that retrospective making of was done in the early 2000s, obviously Gene Wilder was still with us, and the hot blonde was still kind of attractive still at the time. So there's interviews with Gene Wilder and the hot blonde, and I can only assume Mel Brooks as well and stuff. So I can only assume it was like a retrospective making of documentary that was made for a DVD or something. it is it's cool that they include it here, because obviously, since I've never seen or owned this movie before, it's still nice to have a kind of a retrospective documentary that was made about it, way back in freaking like 25 years ago, pushing at this point. So that was definitely a cool extra. We've also got Playhouse Outtake. I don't think I watched that. Sketch Gallery. I don't think I looked at that. Peter Sellers' statement read by Paul someone or other, radio spot, and theatrical trailer. I don't think I checked out any of those other special features. I can only assume, just like with many other Kino Lorber Blu-ray releases, it not only has the theatrical trailer. Oh yeah, I can remember. Pretty sure it not only has the theatrical trailer for the producers, but also other Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder films that Kino Lorber has, previously put out on either DVD or Blu-ray. I think trailers for those films are probably also available to watch. I want to say like a trailer for Life Stinks possibly on there, and some other Gene Wilder films and Mel Brooks films or whatnot or whatever. So there's that. And in true Kino Lorber fashion, the disc art leaves a little bit to be desired, but if it wasn't for Kino Lorber, a lot of these movie titles that we love so much wouldn't be available in such pristine, high definition, or sometimes 4K releases. So when after I bitch about a Kino Lorber disc art or lack thereof, I usually go on to say, well, hell with it, because it's, when we get a Blu-ray, it's more about watching the movie on the Blu-ray and not watching the Blu-ray disc itself. So we can give Kino Lorber a pass, can't we, everyone? Guess that about does it for this review. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks so much for watching. And as always, we'll catch you on the next video.